The distress call hit my scanner before I even saw the smoke rising over the ridge. My name is Kale Reyes, and I was 3 months into a solo survey posting on Threnvos, a world where dragons ruled the skies and humans were barely tolerated guests. We had a small outpost here, nothing more than a research post and a landing strip, and the local clans mostly ignored us, as long as we stayed out of their territory. That distress call was not mechanical. It was biological. A cry, high and broken, echoing through my headset from a frequency range no human throat could ever produce. I grabbed my field kit and ran. The ridge gave way to a shallow valley, and what I found there stopped my breath. A transport nest, torn apart, scattered across the rocks like a broken cradle. And in the wreckage, 3 dragon hatchlings, each barely the size of a delivery truck, tangled in twisted metal and scorched branches. One was still, its chest barely moved. The second thrashed weakly, a wing bent at a wrong angle, blood soaking into the dirt beneath it. The third let out that same broken cry I had heard from the ridge, its eyes wide with a fear I recognized instantly, because fear looks the same in every species when you are staring straight at it. I knew the rules. Humans were not supposed to interfere with dragon affairs. The clans were proud, ancient, and fiercely territorial, and getting involved in something like this could end my posting, or worse, end me. But I did not think about rules. I thought about 3 children dying in the dirt while I stood there deciding whether it was my business. I moved. The still one needed help first. I pressed my hands against its chest, searching for a rhythm, and found nothing. I started compressions, pushing down hard enough to feel something crack beneath my palms, praying I was doing this right, on a creature I had never touched before in my life. 10 seconds, 20, my arms burned. Then, finally, a shudder ran through its body, and its chest rose on its own. I did not have time to celebrate. The second hatchling was losing blood fast. I tore off my jacket and pressed it hard against the wound on its wing, tying it tight with the straps from my kit. It let out a low groan, and its eyes rolled toward me, confused, maybe even suspicious, but it did not pull away. The third hatchling was in shock, shaking, its scales cold to the touch. I wrapped my arms around its neck, the way you would comfort a frightened child, and slowly, its breathing began to steady. None of them were strong enough to walk. My outpost was 2 kilometers away, across broken ground and thinning light. I made 3 trips, dragging each hatchling as gently as I could manage, my shoulders screaming, my hands raw and burned from where one of them had accidentally grazed me with a spark of heat it could not control. I did not stop. I could not stop. Every time I looked at their faces, I saw the same thing. Children. Just children who happened to be born with wings and scales instead of skin like mine. By the time I got the third one settled inside my shelter, the sun had gone down completely, and I was running on nothing but adrenaline and stubbornness. I stabilized them as best as I could with what supplies I had. Splints made from support beams, bandages made from spare uniforms, a sedative dose calculated on pure guesswork, because nothing in my training manual said a word about dragon physiology. I sat between them through the night, checking their breathing every few minutes, terrified that I would wake up to find one of them gone. They survived until morning. That was when the sky changed. I heard the wing beats before I saw them, a deep, rhythmic thunder that shook dust from the rafters of my shelter. I stepped outside to find 6 armored dragons circling low, their eyes locked on my position, and for a moment, I was certain this was the day I died. They landed in a wide circle around my shelter, wings folded tight, expressions unreadable. These were wardens, the elite guard of the Dragon Queen herself, and judging by their formation, they had expected to find a crime scene, not a rescue. One of them, larger than the rest with markings like burnished gold along his jaw, stepped forward and peered into my shelter. I froze, waiting for him to strike. Instead, he went completely still. Inside, wrapped in blankets and resting peacefully, were the three missing hatchlings. Breathing, alive, safe. The warden turned his massive head toward me, and something in his posture shifted from threat to disbelief. He lowered his head, slow and deliberate, in a gesture I did not understand yet, but would come to recognize as one of the highest signs of respect among his kind. The others followed without a word. I stood there in the doorway of my shelter, covered in blood that was not mine, too exhausted to fully process what was happening, while 6 of the most powerful warriors on this planet knelt in front of a human they had never met. Word spread faster than I could have imagined. Within a day, my outpost had more visitors than it had seen in the entire 3 months I had been stationed there. Dragons from clans that had never once acknowledged human presence came simply to see for themselves if the stories were true. I later learned why my actions had caused such a reaction. Among dragonkind, clan rivalries ran deep and old. It was not unheard of for one clan to let the young of a rival clan perish if they found them injured and unattended, simply because loyalty to blood ran stronger than compassion for strangers. Even within the same kingdom, hatchlings from lesser bloodlines were sometimes left to survive or fail on their own, a harsh tradition meant to weed out weakness. But I was not a dragon. I owed no clan, no bloodline, no ancient rivalry. I had no reason to help those 3 hatchlings other than the simple fact that they were young and hurt and needed someone. That, apparently, was almost unheard of among them. 5 days after the rescue, I received a summons I never expected. The Dragon Queen herself wished to see me, and not through a messenger or a proxy. In person, alone, in her own court. No human had ever been granted that audience before. I traveled by escort to the capital, a city carved into the cliffs of the eastern mountains, towers of stone rising higher than anything humanity had ever built on this world. The queen waited in a chamber open to the sky, her scales a deep shade of storm gray, her eyes ancient in a way that made my chest tighten the moment they settled on me. She did not speak immediately. She studied me the way you might study something you could not quite explain. Finally, she asked why. Why would a creature with a lifespan shorter than a single season of her own kind risk everything for 3 hatchlings who were not his own, not his kin, not his responsibility? I gave her the only answer I had. They were kids. That was enough. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything I had experienced in my life. Several of her advisors exchanged glances I could not read. The queen tilted her head slightly, and for the briefest moment, something in her ancient eyes looked almost moved. She told me that among her people, that kind of selfless devotion was something only the eldest and wisest dragons were expected to embody, earned through centuries of discipline and sacrifice. To see it demonstrated instantly, without hesitation, by a stranger from another world entirely, was something her court had never witnessed. I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing at all. The 3 hatchlings, once fully healed, refused to be separated from me. Every attempt by their caretakers to return them to the royal nursery ended with all 3 finding their way back to wherever I happened to be standing. The smallest one, the one whose heart I had restarted with my own hands, took to following me everywhere, chirping softly whenever I stepped out of its sight. The political ripple that followed was larger than I ever anticipated. Clans that had spent generations ignoring or dismissing human presence on Threnvos began sending envoys to our outpost, not out of obligation, but out of genuine curiosity. If a single unarmed human could show that kind of devotion without hesitation, what might an entire species capable of the same be worth as an ally rather than a stranger to be tolerated? Trade talks that had stalled for years suddenly found new momentum. Old suspicions softened, not because of any grand campaign or diplomatic maneuver, but because of 3 small hatchlings who would not stop climbing onto my shoulders every chance they got. I never set out to change anything. I never thought about kingdoms or politics or the future of 2 species learning to trust each other. I only saw 3 children in danger, and did what anyone should have done in that moment. Weeks later, I sat outside my shelter as the sun dipped behind the mountains. The same 3 hatchlings curled around me, their breathing slow and peaceful. In the distance, banners along the capital's outer wall dipped low in a gesture of honor, a tradition I still did not fully understand, and one I never asked for. I looked down at the smallest hatchling resting against my arm, its chest rising and falling steadily, and I thought about how close I had come to walking away from that ridge without looking back. I was glad, more than anything else in my life, that I had not. Sometimes the smallest choices carry the heaviest weight, and sometimes a single act of kindness, given without hesitation and without expecting anything in return, is enough to change the course of history between 2 entire worlds.